This presentation will guide you on how to complete the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. Our goal is to get you familiar with the FAFSA if you have not gone in and looked at it yet. If you have already gone in, we will be pointing out where families and students tend to make common mistakes and errors. It may prompt you to go back and take another look at your application. The application process for the FAFSA is done online. You'd want to do this as early as possible, and keep in mind that this is an annual process. You complete it every year for every student in your family. It is possible for you to download a paper FAFSA from the Federal Student Aid website. However, it's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks for the government to process it for you once submitted. You want to make sure you are organized before you sit down to complete your FAFSA. You don't want to be jumping around and trying to find different paperwork such as Social Security numbers, bank records, and tax returns for how much you made and how much you have in personal assets. We will help you get organized so it's a smooth process when you sit down to do this on a computer. The FSA ID replaces what is known as the PIN number for federal student aid processes. Prior to this year, students and parents would create a 4-digit PIN number to go in and sign the FAFSA, promissory notes, and complete entrance counseling. Like most times when you visit a website, you set up an account. You create a user ID and a password. The federal government is now in line with the process and created the FSA ID. A student, and if you are dependent, at least one of your parents, need to have an FSA ID. This ID will stay the same for each year. If you have one and can't remember it, you can always go to fsaid.ed.gov and it will prompt you through the process of trying to remember what it was. You will set up a series of challenge questions to prove that you are who you say you are. When you go to the FAFSA website, you will have options such as starting a new FAFSA, logging in and making corrections, adding a school, and viewing your student aid report, which is a printout of your FAFSA information. The website to complete your FAFSA is www.fafsa.gov. Please do not ever pay to have your FAFSA completed. It's a free application. The FAFSA on the Web Worksheet is a tool that the Department of Education created with the idea being that if you filled out the worksheet before you sit down at a computer, you will be better prepared to complete the FAFSA online. The parent and the student can use this worksheet to take notes. There are a lot of advantages to doing the online application because it has built-in edits to prevent errors. It will remove those questions that you don't need to answer based on your previous responses. And there are some good hints and helpful tips that will appear on the right-hand side of each screen. Typically, FAFSAs are processed in a couple of days when you submit them online. You can also go in and check the status of your application. There are 5 sections to the online FAFSA application, which includes the parent and the student sections. When you first go in to do this, it's going to ask you to enter your FSA ID. If you are a parent filling this out for the student, but the student is not there with you, you are going to enter the student's information. At this point in the year, there are 2 options for the FAFSA that are available. The 2015-2016 FAFSA is for students who are attending school now, but incoming freshmen want to complete the 2016-2017 FAFSA. Summer kicks off the financial aid year at Kent State University. This FAFSA is good for the summer of 2016 all the way to the spring of 2017. The first section of the FAFSA on the web is the student demographic information. They will be collecting the basic information about the student. It is important that if a parent is working on the student's form, to keep in mind that this is the student's application for federal aid, and to use their information, not the parents'. The students are the one receiving the financial aid. It is very important that you use legal names that appear on the student's Social Security card. If not, it could result in a delay of processing your FAFSA. For men, if you are 18 years of age as of the day you complete the FAFSA form, you are expected to be registered with Selective Service. If you're 17 on the day you fill out the form, you do not need to worry. One of the options you will be presented with is to let Selective Service register you for this process. So FAFSA will share this information with Selective Service and make sure you are registered for the draft. Next, we have the student eligibility section. Only U.S. citizens or those individuals here as current residents or eligible non-citizens are eligible to receive financial assistance for college from the federal government. They also want to know what the student's high school completion status will be and what your school level is going to be when you come to college this year. For most students, the answer will be never attended, but we do have a lot of students who have College Credit Plus, previously known as post-secondary, where you are currently taking college-level courses and your high school courses. So if you've been fortunate enough to have that opportunity to earn college credit, we would want you to answer the question appropriately. If you have college credit, but are still considered to be a first-year student, then you would want to indicate that you have attended college, but you are still a first-year student. Maybe you've earned enough hours to be considered a sophomore or junior. Here is how we define credit hours earned at Kent State. If you've earned 30 hours, but less than 60, then you are considered to be a sophomore. Juniors are those who have earned 60 to 89.99 credit hours. The admissions office is still going to recognize you as an incoming freshman for scholarship purposes. But for financial aid purposes, if you have sophomore level or junior level, it's going to increase your amount to borrow in student loans. Next, you will need to provide the name of your high school. You must have a high school diploma or GED, or have completed homeschooling to be eligible to receive financial aid. You can choose up to 10 schools to receive your FAFSA information. It will only be sent to the schools that you choose. If you do not choose Kent State, we will not be able to view your FAFSA, and you will not receive financial aid. You can either do a search for a school name or by state, or if you know the school's school code, you can type that in as well. At Kent State University, our school code is 003051. After you complete your search and enter the school code, you must click the Add button for it to appear under selected schools. You will also be asked your housing plans for the upcoming year. As a first-year student, you're going to click that you are either an on-campus student or you will commute from home and choose with parents. The next section of the FAFSA form is trying to determine for financial aid purposes only, should the student be considered dependent or independent. A dependent student will need to provide their parents' information on the FAFSA form, and an independent student will only report their own information and a spouse if applicable. The government has developed a series of questions as to how they will determine whether a student is dependent or independent. Essentially, a student has to be able to answer yes to one of these questions in order to be considered independent. Some questions to be answered are, is the student 24 years of age? Are they a graduate student? Do they have a child that they are going to support at least 51%? Are they currently serving on active duty? Are they a veteran? Are they in legal guardianship? If the student cannot answer yes to any of these questions, then the student is expected to put their parents' information on the FAFSA form. It does not matter if the student moves out of the home the day they turn 18, and it does not matter if the family makes the decision that funding the education is the responsibility of the student. You must be able to answer yes to one of these questions. Now, the federal government does recognize that not all students can provide parent information due to special circumstances. There are situations where the student cannot provide the parent's information, and it's not a refusal of the parent to share the information, it's simply because the student physically cannot get it. Usually these are students who were removed from the home due to an abusive family environment, the parents are incarcerated, or the student just does not know where the parents are and therefore cannot provide information. Schools have the ability to petition on the student's behalf to the federal government to have that dependency status overridden. But we only do this based on documentation and a very thorough review of the student. If you feel like this may apply to you, please contact one of our representatives in the financial aid office for additional assistance. From this point on, we will assume that the parent information is going to be provided. Let's take a look into what steps the parent will need to complete. Unfortunately, figuring out who the parent is to fill out the FAFSA form can be complicated. The federal government has made a flowchart to help those in question figure out who to use as a parent. If your parents are married, both parents' information needs to be reported on the FAFSA. If your parents are not married but do live together, then again, both parents' information needs to be reported. If your parents are divorced, then the parent you live with the most needs to be reported on the FAFSA. If the parent you are reporting is remarried, you will need to provide your biological parent and the step-parent's information. Be sure to never include information about a grandparent, foster parent, legal guardians, brothers, or sisters. This is about the student's biological parents, or adoptive parents who have legally adopted the student. If a grandparent raises the student, then that may be considered a special circumstance as we talked about earlier. We do not want the grandparent filing as the parent unless they have legally adopted the student. Now that you know what parent to use, demographic information is now reported. Parents get an opportunity to provide a parent email address as well, so that information sent from the FAFSA can also be sent to the parent. If the student gets an email saying their FAFSA got rejected, or it is completed, then the parent will get that same email. Next is to confirm the student's household size. What they are trying to do is get a financial picture of the household in which the student lives and how many people are being supported on the income in that household. You will report your parent number, yourself, and others that are being supported at least 51%, including other children or even a grandparent that may live in your household. Of that number, they want to know how many of those individuals are going to be in college. So if there is multiple children in college, you will report yourself and others that are attending. However, you do not include a parent that is in college. Income and asset information will be reported next for the parent. The first question asked is, have you already completed a tax return, or if you plan to file a tax return? If you indicate you are going to file, then we know you are going to use estimated numbers. They will want to know your filing status, if you're filing jointly, head of household, or filing separately. At this point, it will be determined if the IRS Data Retrieval Tool can be utilized. This is the process where you can link your FAFSA to your tax return and import your data from the tax return right to your FAFSA form. You are not going to be able to do this if you have filed an amended tax return, a foreign tax return, or if you file married filing separately. It usually takes about 2 weeks from the time you file electronically to be able to use the data retrieval tool, because the IRS needs time to process your tax return. If it is determined that you can use the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, the first screen you will be presented with will say that you are leaving the FAFSA on the web form. This is okay to do. What they are doing is transferring you to the irs.gov website. Some information will be pre-populated, like the parent's name, social security number, and the date of birth that was provided on the FAFSA. This process is very, very sensitive. All information must be entered the exact way it appears on your tax return. For example, if you've abbreviated Avenue on your tax return, then be sure to abbreviate it on this form. If you use a 4-digit zip code extension on your tax return, then make sure to use it here as well. Otherwise, you won't get a successful match. When you do get a successful match, it's going to show you all of the information that's going to transfer onto your FAFSA. Then it will give you 2 options, to transfer now or do not transfer. If you get to this point and you choose do not transfer your tax return information, you have a chance of getting selected for an audit, because the government and the school are going to know that the information was available to transfer and you didn't do it. Therefore, if you get as far as to transfer your tax information, choose Transfer Now. It'll import your information and bring you right back to your FAFSA page and show you the information that was transferred. If you are not eligible to use the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, if it is not available when you go to fill it out, or if you're not able to get a successful match, it's okay. You can still manually input your information from your tax return. Remember that on the right-hand side of the page is the Helps and Hints column. When your cursor is in a certain field, it will tell you where on your tax return to find the information and what to include. If you are unsure about using estimated numbers, then use last year's tax return. You can use it as a basis for your estimates. FAFSA cannot determine how much Parent 1 or Parent 2 has earned, so they've asked you to break down the amounts per parent. They also want to know if the parent is a dislocated worker. Typically, a person is a dislocated worker if they receive unemployment, are laid off, has lost a job, or if you're unlikely to return to a previous occupation. If you check that off, you may be eligible to apply for a special circumstance, which we will talk about later. Continuing with parent financial information, the first line is going to ask you to enter the parent's income tax for 2015. It will ask you to do a little calculation to find out the amount. If you are estimating, you can use the Parent Taxes Paid calculator. Next, you will see a series of items that you may or may not have received. If you check that you have received one of these items, you will be expected to include a dollar amount. Again, if you need help on what to include, refer to the Help and Hints box. Moving down to the asset question, this is going to be individualized for every applicant. You're going to be asked, as of today, does the total amount of your parent's current asset exceed? And then there will be a dollar amount. This is going to be customized to you, based on your income, your untaxed income, how many people are in the household, and the age of the older parent. Depending on what your answer is to that question, you may need to provide more information on your assets. You can click on the highlighted blue link to see more information on assets and what should be included. If you do need to provide asset information, the FAFSA will ask you to break down your dollar amount into categories. The current balance of your bank accounts, investments, and the current net worth of a business or farm, if applicable, would be reported here. Another common asset are the 529 prepaid college tuition or savings plans. Sometimes these can cause confusion of who reports this asset, the parent or the student. If the parent is the owner of the account, they will provide the asset, and they would report the value of all of the savings accounts that are owned, no matter if they are for the student you are completing the FAFSA for or another child. We know that assets can be confusing on what to report and what not to report. If you have any questions on assets, please contact our office. After the parent income and asset information is entered, the student information comes next. They will have the same questions for the students as they had for the parents. All students must provide their financial information for these questions. Even if you are not required to file a 2015 income tax return, you will need to calculate your earnings for the year, if the student worked. Use W-2 forms and other records to answer the questions in this section. After this section, you will continue to answer questions about student untaxed income and assets, just like the parent section. The student and a parent will sign and submit the FAFSA using their FSA ID. Only one parent will need to sign the FAFSA. Once signed, you will receive your confirmation page. At this point, the student has the option to transfer parent information onto another FAFSA if they have a brother or sister that also needs to complete one. So then all the other student will need to complete is the student section of their FAFSA form. This confirmation page is student-specific. You will see at the bottom of the page what schools will receive your FAFSA and what financial aid you may receive, including the Pell Grant and student loans. Before you submit your FAFSA, review to check for errors. As mentioned before, errors may result in your FAFSA being chosen for an audit. Verification is the official term for the FAFSA audit process. Your student aid report will be emailed after the federal government processes your FAFSA, and you will find out if they have selected your FAFSA for verification. You can ignore this notification. However, if you get a letter from Kent State University that says you are selected for verification, and it tells you what to submit, you need to submit those documents. If you don't, you will not receive any federal or state financial aid, including direct loans and parent loans. This is not an optional process. The FAFSA form is based on the 2015 income tax information. 2016 may turn out to be very different financially for your household. Schools have the ability to use professional judgment and say, okay, we can do it more appropriately to use an estimate of what 2016 is going to be instead of what 2015 was. The option of this process does not start until April 1st of the year you plan to attend. The reason for that is that it's a lot easier to do an accurate projection when at least a quarter of the year has passed as opposed to the beginning of January when you complete the FAFSA. Depending on your special circumstance, you will need to provide documentation of the change your household has incurred along with the current income being earned in the household. If you have any additional questions about completing the FAFSA or the verification and special circumstance processes, please contact our office at 330-672-2972.